Folks, welcome to another edition of the National Emergency Coalition conference call. We are waiting for Senator Rand Paul to join us. He should be on any moment. The moment he is on, we're going to go right to him because his time is, as you can imagine, is very short. He's expecting a vote in 10 or 15 minutes. So we're not going to have a whole lot of time with him, but as soon as he comes on, we want to get him before you.
All right, great, Bishop Jackson. This is Rand Paul.
All right, Senator, thank you so much for taking time to join us. We really appreciate that. Senator, out of respect for your time, we know you've got a vote coming up. We're going to go right into it, skip the preliminaries and long introductions. Share with us anything that's on your mind right now, and if you would, if you still got maybe, if you can do that for 5 or 6 minutes, and then maybe we can get a couple of questions in as well. But thanks again for joining us, sir. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. The biggest problem still in Washington is a very fundamental problem. It's a problem that every American family faces, and that's that you have to spend only what comes in. Every American family is required to do that, but in Washington, we're still spending, nearly $1 trillion every year that we don't have. We borrow over $1 million every minute. And the problem is, we try to make amends, we try to cut back on wasteful spending, and sometimes even members of both parties refuse to vote for it. And I'll give you one quick example. We tried a few months ago to get rid of $3 million for Twiggy, the water skiing squirrel. Twiggy, the water skiing squirrel, is used to promote the selling of American walnuts in Spain, which I tell people, if you've got a walnut farm, great, but we don't have enough taxpayer money to be spending promoting your product. So we actually spent $3 million on this silly squirrel, and we tried to cut it off, and we had a vote, and unfortunately over half the Republicans and half the Democrats voted to keep this $3 million. And I tell people you can't balance the budget by cutting $3 million, but you know what? If you can't cut $3 million for something ridiculous like Twiggy the water skiing squirrel, I would think that how are we ever going to tackle the big issues that confront us? Social Security is $6 trillion short. Medicare is $35 trillion short. So really we need people who will make responsible decisions. One of the things I think government should do, though, is take care of our veterans, and I've been very upset with the President's handling of the Veterans Affairs. For years now, it's been known that people are being made to wait in line. Now it turns out that maybe some of the people at the VA were actually falsifying records in order to get bonuses by saying the waiting lines were shorter than they actually were. I'm a physician, and I was trained in 3 different veterans hospitals. Veterans can get good care there. But really, I see no excuse for why, if you have to wait in a line more than a certain period of time, we shouldn't let you have a voucher to go to a private facility. One of the other bills that I've introduced in the last week or two is one called Stand With Israel. And this Stand With Israel Pact says that we should not send any money to the Palestinian Authority if they're going to be associated with Hamas. Because Hamas, as you know, has called for the destruction of Israel. It's in their charter. They don't recognize Israel, and they've actually been inciting violent acts against Israel for years now. So ours made it very clear that no money goes to the Palestinian Authority unless Hamas were to recognize Israel and renounce violence. And this is a big deal because it now looks that there are reports being written that the reason Hamas has joined the unity government is that they need a bailout. They're out of money, and they want American money now to flow to Hamas. And I'm going to do everything possible I can to prevent any American money from flowing to Hamas or to any country that does not recognize Israel as a right to exist. With that, I'd be open to some questions. Bishop, if you've got some questions from your audience.
Absolutely. Folks, in order to ask the Senator a question, press *6, and we will take you in order. Senator, let me open up with this question. I've never seen anything like this administration in terms of lawlessness. And we just found out, for example, in the negotiation for the release of this Afghan American prisoner of war, American prisoner of war in Afghanistan, that the president refused or failed or whatever to notify Congress that he was going to be releasing prisoners from Guantanamo Bay. What can be done about this president's utter refusal to obey the law and to follow the Constitution?
Well, this is a real problem, and despite the exactitude of the law, he takes it into his own hands. Sometimes the law, though, is written poorly, and the law will have some exemptions. So this law, I think, has some exemptions for emergencies, and even though this wasn't an emergency, he just calls it an emergency. It's the same way with aid to Palestinian Authority. He has presidential veto power or waiver power to do whatever he wants. So Congress, a lot of times, they write legislation, but then they write so many waivers into it or leave it so vague that the president can do whatever he wants. And then some of it's the defiance of the president, who just says, by golly, I don't care what Congress has decreed. I've got a pen and a phone, and I'll do what I want. So some have argued we should be able to take him to court, and it's been tried, but the problem is the court a lot of times does not say you have standing for things like suing the president over separation of powers. But we continue to fight. I have him in court over the NSA because I think what he's done with taking Americans' phone records is not legal, and so we're going to try to get the courts to rule on that, but it's very difficult.